So, Locked On Blue Jackets, we're talking about the two young Jakes, Jake Bean and Jake Christiansen, how they did this season, and which one is more likely to finish his season in Columbus. All that coming up on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Hayden Houshorn. And we are here to bring you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and the SiriusXM app. So today we've got a couple of defensemen to talk about. We're going to continue our season reviews. One of them didn't play a whole lot. The other one played a little bit more, but not much more. So we're talking about the two Jakes. I always call them Young Jake and Youngest Jake because we had oldest Jake in Jake Voracek as well. But let's start out with Jake Bean, who was on a real good start to the season. He had 6 points in 14 games before going down with, I believe, the exact same injury that took out Zach Werenski the previous game. So, but up until then, I thought he looked real good. What did you think, Hayden, of the little that we got to see of Jake Bean this season?
Yeah, just real quickly, that 2-game stretch when we lost Werenski and then Jake Bean, that was pretty much like the worst moment this past season for the Jackets.
That was okay. Well, let's just give up on all hopes of doing anything this season. There goes two of our top four defensemen in back-to-back games.
Jake Bean's, I think he's a really underestimated player. I think he's really underestimated. I think the Jackets got a lot of value out of him when they moved Seth Jones, and then that whole trade happened, a three-way trade with Carolina. We got back a Jake Bean, former first-round pick, 13th overall, back in, I believe, 2016 from Carolina. So the Jackets got a former first-round pick, and he's pretty good. He's a really good player. I think that flashes immediately when you see Jake Bean. I know some people really don't like him, and he's dealing with some off-ice issues, and maybe that plays into why people don't like him, which is valid. But the hockey side of Jake Bean, I think, is really, really good, honestly. I do. I think he's a player, and I don't know if he's $2.3 million a year good, and he's going to be due for a new contract at the end of this season. But if he has a good season, and if he can turn out 60, 70 games this upcoming year somehow, depending on like lineup things and whatnot, he could stick around for a while.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like he's, of the three kind of the big guys that I'm kind of looking at as potential trades that the Blue Jackets could make in Boquist, Bean, and Peak. He's the one that I think has the least value, but might be the most, like you said, underestimated, underrated. I like Jake Bean's game a lot. I thought he had a really strong season with the Blue Jackets last year. Played 67 games, had 25 points. In those 67 games, which was a career high. I believe that was his first full-time season, technically. He played 42 games with the Carolina Hurricanes the season before, but he was on pace for a 35-point season this year. And again, obviously you can't look at a 14-game stretch and be like, well, obviously he was going to keep that pace up for the 68 games that they were missing him, but yeah, I like his game a lot. I think it's kind of an underrated, or what's the word I want? An understated. He's not flashy. He's not, an offensive talent like Adam Boquist. He's not really a shutdown defenseman. He's kind of in the middle, I think, if he can do both pretty competently. But he's not going to be out here scoring like highlight reel goals on the power play like Adam Boquist is. That being said,
I disagree with that, by the way.
Pardon?
I'll let you finish, but I disagree. I disagree with that. I'll let you finish first, but I'm just a heads up.
Okay. I was just going to say, I don't know whether he's going to be a Blue Jacket by the end of the season. I feel like he is Damon Severson light, a little bit. Maybe that's me kind of just grasping at straws or trying desperately to kind of compare one incoming defenseman to a possibly outgoing defenseman, but that's the kind of vibe I get from Jake Bean. And I don't think they need both of them, and they've signed Damon Severson long term. So I would be very surprised if Jake Bean is a Blue Jacket by the end of the season. Whether he goes before the season starts, whether he goes at the trade deadline, who knows? But that's how I feel about that.
I really like Jake Bean just because I feel like his offensive upside is greater than that of even an Adam Boquist. And we'll get to Adam Boquist's season review here shortly. We're, going numerical here, and we're at 22, 27's coming up. So that'll be interesting to compare these guys kind of side by side. But I think Jake Bean I think he's really strong when the puck is on his stick. I think he skates with a purpose. And I think his power play awareness is really, really high. I think he is. It makes sense to me when I see him play. I'm like, okay, I understand why Carolina took him in the first round. He seems like he plays really extremely confident, which is why he probably gets hurt because he plays too confident. Like guys, some defensemen, and I'm not necessarily saying this is a bad thing, but it feels like other defensemen sometimes let up and wait to jump in on the play. Jake Bean sometimes gets caught jumping in the play too much, and then he's out of position. But he's 25 years old, but making $2.3 million, I believe, that's higher than some of these other defensemen. So the expectation's higher. So when you grade him compared to what he's making, it's not necessarily great. But when I compare him personally to these other defensemen, I really, really like him, man. I really think that there's something there. And yeah, his defense could certainly use work, but his plus minus isn't atrocious. And when I watched the film, I spent, hours last night watching Jake Bean film, and all I could see was plays where Andrew Peeke is playing crap defense. And when I compare,
I do think, part of I think Jake Bean's struggles has been a kind of, again, a universal Blue Jackets issue over the past couple of seasons of inconsistent ice time and inconsistent line mates,
True.
And is Jake Bean struggling because of his line mate? Is he struggling because he's playing a bigger role than he was used to? Or, is it some combination of all of the above?
I think he could play really well with Boquist. I didn't really like when he played with Gudbranson last year, but that's more on Gudbranson, to be honest. Then again, his season reviews coming down the line, and we said we were going to give out some bad grades for these defensemen, and we really haven't shredded them too much. But
no, I think we've been a little bit mean, but I don't think we've not been as mean as I was expecting us to. We'll give Jake Bean a grade in the final segment because I want to kind of compare him to Jake Christiansen, who we're going to talk about in a second, who is I think a very similar player in a lot of ways. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how Jake Christiansen's season went with both the Blue Jackets and the Monsters. But first, I'm going to tell you about a product that I use literally every day, and that is AG1. It is the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. I gave it a try because I'd heard all of the hype, and quite frankly, I'm very suggestible like that. I was tired of taking a bunch of different supplements, and I wanted something that kind of covered all of the bases and didn't taste terrible. And AG1 is all of those things. So I wake up in the morning, I'll make coffee, I'll make a cup of tea, I will drink my AG1, and it makes me feel like I'm ready to take on the day. It makes me feel like I'm doing something good for my body. And it really balances out the fact that I'm a gremlin person that exists basically on like chicken nuggets and day-old pizza. AG1 is really, really great. It's a micro habit that develops macro benefits, helps everybody take care of their health every single day. Costs less than $3 a day, which is way less than the $7 non-dairy latte that I will get from a coffee shop. And that seems pretty good, if you ask me. It's an effective daily habit with high-quality sourced ingredients. Win-win. And if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Go ahead and check it out. You're not going to regret it. All right, we're back. We're locked on Blue Jackets. I'm Jay Foster. That's Hayden Heilsund. We're talking about the two Jakes today. Jake Christiansen, who I am a big fan of and have been basically since his first season with the Blue Jackets. I think he, again, like Jake Bean, is really underrated. He's only 23 years old. This season, he played 24 games with the Blue Jackets, had 4 assists in that time. And then with the Monsters, he had 34 points in 50 games. He's been their number one guy for a couple of seasons now. He led the Monsters in scoring a couple of seasons ago, which as a defenseman either says something about him or says something about the rest of the team, and I'm not sure which one it is. But how do you feel about Jake Christiansen? Because I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's a guy that came in much like, in my eyes, a guy like Gavin Bayreuther, but in less games, filled a role and filled it adequately. I felt like Jake Christiansen, his game when he played with when he played with Jake Bean, that like 2-game stretch, I thought it was really good. I really did. I was watching, Jake Bean play with him last night from a game in early November against the Islanders, and I loved the way Jake Christiansen was playing. And he didn't look like he was out of place. He didn't look like, oh, this is a AHL guy up. He was crashing the zone, making eye contact with Johnny Gaudreau. There was a little chemistry developed between him and Johnny on offense. I was like, this is kind of nice. And again, he played 20-something games, I believe. So there's a whole bunch there in the middle that I can't really speak to. But he had 4 assists. So yeah, there could be something here with Jake Christiansen. I don't know if it's like on par with what I think Jake Bean has, but hey, Jake Christiansen keeps turning out good years with the Monsters and good games with the Monsters. He's allowed to come up as much as he wants, but I really like what I see out of a Jake Christiansen, and I think he could play well with just about anybody, and I think his offensive awareness is really good in terms of how he plays with other forwards on the ice, which can be really dangerous. And a guy like another guy to throw that in the mix is Nick Blankenburg. Nick Blankenburg is also a guy who knows when to crash the net and receive a pass from these forwards, which I love. I love when a defenseman just flies up and hits a one-timer like right down by the crease. It didn't go well for Jake Christiansen. He didn't have any goals last year, but that could change this year. Yeah. That could change. You could get he has his first NHL goal already, I believe, from 2 years ago, I want to say, but he could light it up this year if he gets some more time. I believe that.
Yeah. He, I believe, don't quote me on this. Actually, I'm going to look this up before I say something that might be incorrect. I believe he was one of the Blue Jackets that scored his first NHL goal in his first NHL game. I am just going to double check that.
Marcus
did
that too.
I like Jake Christiansen a lot. The problem with Jake Christiansen is I feel like through no fault of his own, he has been pushed down the lineup because of guys coming in like bringing in guys like Jake Bean in a trade, or bringing in guys like Provorov and Severson. And this is not me saying that they shouldn't have traded for these guys so they could play Jake Christiansen a bunch. But to me, he is a very good young defenseman that is unfortunately kind of stuck in this logjam of very good young defensemen that the Blue Jackets have. Like how many defensemen do the Blue Jackets have under the age of 23 that are like probably NHL caliber, because I feel like I'm not gonna go ahead and count now, but I feel like they have at least 5 or 6 guys that could be playing on that bottom pairing. If you take away the top 4 and you look at who's playing with Erik Gudbranson this season, there's like 6 guys you could put in there, and I feel like Jake Christiansen has definitely earned the right to argue that, or to try and kind of make his case. I think training camp is going to be really interesting, because I do wonder if it's going to come down to who works the best with Erik Gudbranson.
Gosh, it's gonna be tough because he's a
which
tough player to work with.
and I mean, like, we'll get into the Erik Gudbranson of it all tomorrow, I think. But like at the end of the day, he is going to be stapled to that third pairing. He's going to be playing that right D position. I think Jake Christiansen has. Let me just pull up his thing. He can play on the left side, so like that's in his favor. In a way that like Marcus Bjork is a right-handed is a right defenseman. So he's probably kind of on the lower side. And then like Anna Boquist is a right defenseman as well. Jake Bean can play either side. So, it's really, to me, it might come down to the two Jakes. Andrew Peak plays the right side as well, I believe. Yeah. So, is it going to come out to, well, these two can play on the left side. So they're going to get the chance to play with Gudbranson on that third pairing. Jake Christiansen's first NHL goal was not in his first game. It was in his fourth game. So sorry for being incorrect. It does happen. I also want to point out one thing about Jake Christiansen, which is I just crunched the numbers. He averaged 15 minutes a game this season. So, like, I know it's easy to look at he played 24 games and only had 4 assists and no goals. He was playing, for a defenseman, 15 minutes is basically nothing, So I think, again, inconsistent, exactly all of the same things that we just talked about with Jake Bean. Inconsistent line mates, inconsistent ice time, I think. Why are we surprised that the defense struggled last season? Like... Every time I look this up, I'm like, oh, why is this a surprise? He played for like 5 minutes with one guy and then they moved it up. And then someone got injured and he had to go up in the lineup or down in the lineup. Or then he got injured and missed a bunch of time, So like, it is what it is. But for my money, I go back and forth on how Jake Christiansen's going to do this season. My guess is he tears it up in the Monsters. He's still under team control. I'm just looking at the non-roster forwards. He's only 23, so he's still a couple of years away from being a UFA. He needs a new contract next season, just like so many Blue Jackets.
Yeah.
But he's only making $775K at the minute. So if you're in a cap crunch, that is not bad value for a guy like Jake Christiansen, who I think you give him like a full NHL season, I think you're going to see a completely different player.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, actually. I really do. I did not mind what I saw out of Jake Christiansen this year. I did not think that he was a huge reason why the Blue Jackets stunk. He only played 20-something games. And, his first game he played was in November, and his last game he played was in April. And I think his last game, he actually ended up having 2 points against the Flyers. So, again, don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure that's what I was reading. He actually finished the year pretty strong. And, yes, is he in a log jam? Absolutely. But the one thing he has on his side is that these guys coming in, Damon Severson, 28 years old. Ivan Provorov, 26 years old. Jake Bean, 25-year-old. Christiansen's only 23. So he's got time to keep developing, keep working on his game. And this is a famous role of the Jackets, but that Scott Harrington role, like that guy that just is a plug. Whenever somebody's hurt on the defense, who's going to be that guy that can play either the left or right, and we can just throw in there with anybody. Scott Harrington did that role pretty well. I think Jake Christiansen, Gavin Bayreuther, I think these guys could both be that next Scott Harrington. And if you pit them up against each other, Bayreuther versus Christiansen, I don't know which one. Well, Bayreuther's gone, obviously. I got to remind myself that he's gone.
Yeah, I know. I was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
I had kind of mentally assumed that he was back as well, even though we literally just talked about him going to Dallas.
Yeah.
My issue with that is I don't necessarily mind Jake Christiansen as that seventh defenseman, but he kind of fits into that section, that subset of players where I'm like, if he's not going to be in the NHL, put him in the AHL. He's young, he's good, he's still developing. Like, I don't want him to sit in the press box. I do think that if we have learned anything from this season, it is that defensive depth is so important. You need guys like Christiansen who can kind of And the beauty of having the monsters just down the road, it's what, like, I ask this every single time we bring this up. It's what, an hour and a half, 2 hours to Cleveland, depending on whether you stick to the speed limit or not. He's in Cleveland.
Drive speed
They have
limit,
an injury at
folks.
morning skate. He can be there by lunchtime, you know?
Yeah.
So that, I think, really, that's a big benefit. And so that's kind of what I think they should probably do with Jake Christiansen, is stick him in the monsters. He's going to tear it up down there. He's going to be a big piece of the monsters, who we think, we've talked about it, are probably going to be a better team this season, looking at the pieces they're adding, looking at the pieces they're getting back from injury, and also the Blue Jackets. And if they need to call him up, they can. They don't need to sit him in the press box, but I think you're right. I think having him as that kind of pseudo seventh defenseman, he should be the first guy they call when they need someone to plug in for a couple of games.
Yeah, no, he could be. And there's other guys that he's competing with against that too. I mean, Marcus Bjork, Billy Sweezy, like there's tons of guys in that realm too that are competing for that seventh defenseman spot. So he's gonna have to do a whole lot to stick out, I believe. But that being said, you also don't. If you just string together consistent game after consistent game, and that plus minus starts to not look so bad, then yeah, you're gonna get looked at, man. You're gonna get looked at.
I think the Blue Jackets are big fans of Jake Christiansen as well. You can kind of see in looking at, okay, he's one of the guys that gets called up first every single time. I think Jarmo Kekalainen is very high on Jake Christiansen. Be interesting to see again how he meshes with Mike Babcock, which is something we're going to talk about on Monday's episode, actually. But what we're going to do is we'll take another quick break, and then we'll hand out some letter grades. Maybe we'll hand out some summer homework. And then we'll see where we go from there. So that's coming up in just a second on Locked On Blue Jackets. All right, we're back with Locked On Blue Jackets. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. We are marching closer and closer to that 500 subscriber number, which is super rad. So if you haven't hit subscribe already, please feel free to do so. Okay, so let's hand out some grades. Which Jake do you think gets a higher grade?
I think Jake Christiansen gets a higher grade, but not by much. It's really hard to give these guys grades because it's easier to give Christiansen a grade because he played 20 games. Jake Bean literally played one more game than Zach Werenski, so it's hard to give him. But I'm going to give Jake Bean a C-, and I'm going to give Jake Christiansen a C+. I felt like Jake Christiansen being healthy, being available for the Jackets is huge. That's obviously availability is the best ability. And he had that over Jake Bean this year. I know Jake Bean cannot control the fact that he got injured, but that just sticks out to me more. And they both put up similar play on the ice. I think Jake Bean is a little bit better on the power play. I think he has high offensive upside. So I'd like to see more of him. If I'm given the two, like which one do you want to see more of? I want to see a lot more of Jake Bean. But Jake Christiansen, certainly not a bad option. So I'm going C- for Bean, C+ for Christiansen.
Interesting. I think I'm going to put Jake Christiansen higher, but I was going to give Jake Christiansen a B, just because of the work that he did with the Monsters as well. I think can't be understated. And then I think I'm going to give Jake Christiansen, like you said, it's tough to give a guy a grade when he only played 14 games. But of the games that he played, the ones that, the stuff that I watched, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give him a C+. I think it's tough to give these guys homework necessarily, because I think what we need to see from both of them is just kind of consistency and health. Jake Christiansen is pretty good at staying healthy, knock on wood. If we could get a full season of Jake Bean, that'd be great. So the wrap-up question becomes, which one is more likely to finish the season in Columbus? Do you think Jake Bean gets traded? Do you think Jake Christiansen is a trade casualty? Because I feel like there's probably value for both of them in trades, but I feel like you'll probably get a better return for Jake Bean. But do you want to trade a guy like Jake Bean when you look at how important defensive depth is based on every single player being injured last season,
Yeah, there's three guys kind of in that category of, I think one of them is getting traded. Just like how Gavrikov got traded last year, Savard a couple of years before that. The Jackets will move a defenseman, I believe, at some point. It just needs to become clear who are the guys that they want to keep. I feel like Jake Bean, Adam Boquist, Andrew Peak, these guys are all in that like very close to being tradable to a Stanley Cup contender. They just need to put some better play on the ice this upcoming year, just like Gavrikov did, put up some solid play. The Kings were like, yep, give me that. And then we gave it to him. So I personally believe that the tradable asset out of those three is going to be Adam Boquist. Just because he's got a few more years of developing left to go. Like he's younger than Jake Bean and Andrew Peak. And he's good. He's good too. But I like Jake Bean. I really do like him. I think he's a really smart player. I think his knees are explosive. Like I just watch him when the puck's on his stick. I'm like, okay, he's going to do something here. And usually he does do something really productive. And he's really proactive on defense too. I like that. I like him. I would like to see him stay a Blue Jacket, but it would not surprise me if he comes out, Jay, has 20 points in the first 60 games or something like that, and then the Jackets move him right before the deadline. I assume that's right before the deadline. I don't know where 60 games is at, but
give or take. I think it also, you have to think, are the Blue Jackets going to be in the playoff hunt?
True. They might not be.
If they are in the playoff hunt, or if they are, if they've locked in a spot, basically, do they keep hold of him and use him in the playoffs? It's very similar to not very similar, but a couple of seasons ago, the 2019 playoffs, where the Blue Jackets went out and they got Matt Duchene and they got Ryan Zingle, etc., etc.
Screw those guys, by the way.
Well,
I'm just
kidding. They weren't locked into a playoff spot, but they went out and they got those guys, and hey, they made the playoffs and they won their first round. So we could be in a similar position of, look at all these guys with expiring contracts. Do we flip them for picks, or do we make a push for the playoffs? And it's tough to say. So it's something we'll probably be more equipped to talk about in, say, December-ish. Because you know what they say, if you're not in the playoff picture by American Thanksgiving, you're out of the playoff picture. But we'll take a look. I think that's kind of all we have for today, unless you have anything else that you want to say about the two Jakes.
I like Jake Bean. Give him a chance. As a fan, give him a chance. I think he does some good stuff on the ice. That's all I'll say.
Yeah,
I think Jake Christiansen
does too.
Yeah,
he's gonna go to another team and be really good as like their second or third pairing defense.
It's gonna be the biggest FU to Blue Jackets fan.
You can see it happening.
Yeah.
But that's all we've got for today. It is Saturday today, so no episode tomorrow. Monday we'll be back with another episode. We're going to be talking about something that we talked a little bit about earlier this week. And we're going to try and take a look at how Mike Babcock deals with his defense in terms of ice time, in terms of deployment, in terms of load management, things like that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the comments that Zach Werenski made after the Cap City Elite game last week, again, about Mike Babcock. So it's going to be Babcock versus the defense, or not versus the defense, but Mike Babcock and defense in Monday's episode. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JKOBFORSTER. You can find Hayden over at HaydenH971 on Twitter. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. You can find our email at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. Locked on Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube. We're on Sirius XM. We are on all of the places. Also, if you came to hang out last night at Happy Hour, shout out to you. We had a good time. Hopefully you guys did as well. Like I said, we're going to do that kind of every couple of weeks, maybe more often as the season ramps up, maybe less often, depending on how that goes. But we're having fun with it. So hopefully you guys are as well. Once again, Monday's episode is going to be all about Mike Babcock and how he deploys his defense. And until then, make sure you stay locked on.